Hey there, Scripture fans. Welcome to episode 179 of the Bible Difficulties and Answers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Smith, and this is our Tuesday Contradictions edition. Last week, we dove into one of the most thought-provoking challenges from the Skeptic's Annotated Bible. Was Jesus really the first to rise from the dead? That one turned into the single longest episode of this entire series. It was deep, it was detailed, and honestly, it was fun. Today, though, we're back to something a little more familiar. Let's just say the Skeptic's Annotated Bible has thrown us one of their classic, maybe this is a contradiction, but probably not, questions. Still, don't worry, I'll make it interesting. This week's question is, what were the names of the apostles? Now, maybe you've noticed this before. You're reading through the Gospels, minding your own business, and suddenly you realize, wait a second, why does this list of apostles not match the one I read last week? In Matthew's Gospel, there's a Thaddeus. In Luke, he disappears and turns into someone named Judas, the son or brother of James. Mark calls one of them Simon the Canaanite, but Luke calls the same guy Simon the Zealot. So which is it? Did the gospel writers mix things up, or is there something more going on here? Let's unpack this. The apostles' names appear 4 times in the New Testament. Once in Matthew, once in Mark, once in Luke, and again in Acts. Here's what's fascinating. All 4 lists agree on some clear anchors. Peter always comes first. He's the natural leader. James, son of Alphaeus, consistently lands near the end. And Judas Iscariot, the betrayer, always closes the list, until Acts leaves him out altogether, for obvious reasons. So there's stability, but in between those fixed points, things shuffle around a little. Now, this might sound like inconsistency, but when you step back, it actually paints a very human picture of how these memories were passed down. As Jeffrey Kranz explains in the article, Who Were the 12 Apostles? The Complete Guide, on overviewbible.com, he explains the lists aren't random. They're arranged in familiar pairs, Peter and Andrew, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew. That's how people in oral cultures remembered things, by pairing them off, almost like partners in ministry. It's not sloppy, it's structure. So let's take a quick walk through the 4 lists themselves. In Matthew 10, Jesus commissions his apostles and gives us the lineup like this. Now, the names of the 12 apostles are these. First, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the publican, James the son of Alphaeus, and Lebbaeus, whose surname was Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. Notice how Matthew begins with Peter, clearly in the lead, and then groups brothers together, Peter and Andrew, James and John. It's personal, almost like a family roster. Then you get the interesting bit, Lebbaeus, whose surname was Thaddeus. That's where some of the confusion begins. Now, over in Mark 3, we see something a little different. Mark says Jesus appointed 12 that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach. His list goes like this. Simon, he surnamed Peter, James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James, and he surnamed them Boanerges, which is the sons of thunder, and Andrew and Philip, and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas and James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus and Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, which also betrayed him. Here, Mark drops Lebbaeus altogether and just uses Thaddeus. And he moves James and John up in order right after Peter. That probably reflects their inner circle status among the 12. It's the same core group, but Mark's giving us his version of the roster based on what mattered most to his readers. Now, when we come to Luke 6, the list changes a little more. Simon, whom he also named Peter, and Andrew his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon called Zelotes, and Judas the brother of James, and Judas Iscariot, which also was the traitor. Here's where we get Simon the Zealot instead of Simon the Canaanite. It's the same guy, just a different way of describing him. And instead of Thaddeus, Luke lists Judas, the brother or son of James. Then, in Acts 1:13, after Jesus' ascension, the list repeats, with Judas Iscariot now gone, leaving 11 names. That same Judas, the brother of James, remains. So, if we line these up, the only discrepancy is that Matthew and Mark use Thaddeus, while Luke and Acts use Judas, the son of James. Okay, take a second right now. Grab a pen or your phone notes. Jot down your favorite apostle from this group and why. We'll circle back to that in a bit. Okay, now here's the key insight. Those are not two different people. They're two names for the same man. According to church tradition, and as Jonathan McLaughlin explains in his article, an almost definite list of the 12 apostles on the reign of God, Thaddeus was likely a nickname used to avoid confusion with Judas Iscariot. The early church, understandably, didn't want two Judases floating around in their teaching and preaching materials. Think of it this way. If one of your coworkers happened to share the same name as a famous criminal, you might start calling them by a middle name or a nickname, right? I once heard a story of a person named Mike who got the nickname Big Mike after a notorious local scandal broke. Same principle, but different stakes. That's what's going on here. It's the same apostle, but a different label. Okay, problem solved. So, what do these name variations actually tell us? Well, they tell us the gospel writers weren't scripting mythology. They were remembering real men from real moments filtered through real experience. Canaanite and zealot both mean the same thing, essentially zealous one. One's an Aramaic term, the other Greek. Different languages, same meaning. It's the ancient equivalent of calling someone the patriot or the firebrand. So when you see these lists shuffle slightly, it's not chaos, it's culture. It's the fingerprints of authenticity. The Encyclopedia Britannica, in its entry List of the 12 Apostles of Jesus, Names and Facts, points out that these lists reflect linguistic nuances, not contradictions. The early followers of Jesus spoke multiple languages, Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, and nicknames naturally shifted between them. If this nickname swap has you rethinking your own story, maybe a flawed footnote in your faith journey, hit reply on our email to BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers@gmail.com with your thoughts. Well, we might feature it next week. Now, if you're like me, you probably want to slow down for a moment and picture these men as people, not just names on parchment. Let's do that for a bit. We have Peter, impulsive, loud, passionate, the guy who jumps in before thinking it through. He's the one who confesses Jesus as the Christ one moment and denies him the next. He's the stone that has to be broken before he can be built. Andrew, quiet, steady, the behind-the-scenes connector. He's the one who keeps bringing people to Jesus. You could say he's the original networker of the gospel. James and John, the sons of thunder, bold, ambitious, at times a little overzealous, but they mature into deep men of faith. James, the first martyr, John, the long-lived visionary of Revelation. Philip, practical, logical, the one who calculates the cost before feeding 5,000 people. He's the bridge between cultures. often the first to bring Greeks and Gentiles to meet Jesus. Bartholomew, also known as Nathanael, is honest to the core, skeptical at first, but wholehearted once convinced. Thomas, yes, the doubter, but really, he's the verifier. He's the guy who won't just take someone's word for it. And when he finally sees the risen Christ, he gives one of the most powerful confessions in Scripture, "My Lord and my God." Matthew, the tax collector, once exploited his own people for profit. Now he records the words of the Messiah with precision and humility. His gospel reads like the redemption of a man who finally found grace. James, son of Alphaeus, the quiet one, often overlooked, but faithful to the end. Sometimes being lesser known doesn't mean less significant. Thaddeus, or Judas, the son of James, the apostle with two names. Tradition says he carried the gospel east, perhaps to Persia. He's proof that you don't have to be famous to be faithful. Simon the Zealot, the revolutionary turned disciple. Imagine a man who once dreamed of overthrowing Rome, but now serves a kingdom not of this world. And finally, Judas Iscariot, the tragic, cautionary tale. The man who walked with the light, but chose darkness. His story reminds us that proximity to Jesus isn't the same as loyalty to him. Remember that favorite apostle you jotted down earlier? Mine always seems to be shifting from John to Philip. Right now, because I've spent the last several years diving into Christian apologetics, I'd have to say it's Thomas, the guy who needed to see to believe. Because honestly, who hasn't been there? Now, why does all this matter? Because what skeptics call contradiction is actually confirmation. Confirmation that these lists weren't cleaned up or harmonized later. They were preserved, just as the early witnesses remembered them. The Bible doesn't polish away the rough edges, it keeps them, because truth doesn't need editing. As Nathan Albright points out in his blog, Introducing and Ranking the 12 Apostles on Edge-Induced Cohesion, these subtle shifts in order probably reflect the apostles' own rivalries and personalities. Peter wanted to lead. James and John wanted thrones. The rest, they probably argued about it on the road. Very human, very believable. The point isn't that they were flawless. It's that they were called. So let's tie it all together. The apostles' names may differ slightly from list to list, but the story they tell is consistent. 12 ordinary men, different backgrounds, different temperaments, brought together for one extraordinary purpose. These lists remind us that God works through imperfect people who still get the job done. He didn't choose the polished, He chose the willing. And maybe that's the lesson buried inside this so-called contradiction. If the apostles' names can vary and still hold meaning, maybe our own inconsistencies don't disqualify us either. God can use the flawed, the forgettable, even the ones with confusing nicknames to change the world. I'm Lance Smith, and this has been episode 179 of the Bible Difficulties and Answers podcast. If this sparked your curiosity or warmed your heart, check out BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers.podbean.com or shoot me an email at BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or Podbean. Thanks for listening, and as always, wishing you good luck, good health, and God bless. So long, everybody.